Slow and quiet and still often make us uncomfortable. We want to be entertained. We want our minds to stay crammed full. We think we need busy and noise and fast and commotion, but maybe we don't. There is this place that interests me in J.R.R. Tolkien's series, The Lord of the Rings. It's called the Shire. The Shire is made of acres of rolling green hills where these cute little creatures called hobbits build their homes into the woods with round, brightly colored front doors. They sit in their homes and drink tea and write stories and tell stories and have long meals and long conversations and grow their own food. The Shire is a place of rest. But I have noticed I am not living in the Shire. I'm living in Louisville. There is a difference between Louisville and the Shire. We have been in our series that H has been doing called the Bouche, which is short for the French term amuse-bouche, which is a small appetizer that just whets your appetite. So as H said, today I get to wrap up this series with our fourth pillar, rest. Previously, we described this pillar with these words: we try and move at God's pace. But that kind of left it up to us, and it sounded like striving, which didn't sound restful at all. So we just recently changed it to God's pace is peace. I am very interested in God's pace. This week, I was able to meet a newborn baby. My friend Amy and I, this is Amy holding the newborn baby. And as we held that baby, do you know what our expectations of the baby were? None. We didn't have any expectations except for the baby to just lay there and be a baby, right? And we enjoyed the baby in that moment. From the beginning of our lives, we are taught that moving really fast and cramming as much into our lives as possible is what deems us worthy or good. You know, when we start mumbling mama and daddy when we're babies, we're applauded by all of our relatives. When we first start taking our first steps, aunts and uncles applaud us and give us candy. Whenever we get to grade school and we win foot races, we're awarded medallions. When we get to high school and we cram as much into our schedule as possible with sports and extracurricular activities and still making straight A's, then we're considered really quality students. Our aunts and uncles probably didn't applaud us when we took long moments of silence as children, or when we did a really good job taking a nap, we didn't get candy. When we're in grade school, our teachers don't pat us on the back for walking slowly and taking our time in the hallway. Right? Whenever we grow up and we get jobs, we're awarded with promotions and pay raises by working long extra hours and shoving as much into our day as possible. Our bosses don't give us pay raises for doing a good job of unplugging when we get home with our families. Rest in our culture is not celebrated. Striving is celebrated in our culture. And I am a born and bred striver. Strive. I know, as I'd say most of us do, about trying to cram as much into our day as possible, trying to make as many people as possible happy. And have I called my grandma lately, and am I doing a good job helping this person, and am I improving in my character? But lately, whenever I pay attention to God and what He's saying to me, He's often saying, and Jesus gives us this continual invitation in Matthew chapter 11. He says, come to me. If you're weary, if you're heavy, come to me, because I have rest for your souls. I believe that we can live like it's the Shire inside of us, that we can live from a place of rest and peace. So the question is, how? How in the world do we do that? Because I'm not in the Shire. And I think what I'm finding the answer to be is to live connected to the one who is eternal rest. Jesus is a rester, and we are invited to live connected to him. I was able to go to an AA meeting this week. I love AA. I believe everybody can learn a lot about the 12 steps of recovery. And step 11 in the 12 steps is this: sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood him, praying only for knowledge of his will for us and power to carry that out. Conscious contact. I believe God wants us all to live in step 11, improving our conscious contact with God. So when we are living like this, consciously contacting Jesus, that is being in contact with rest, the one who is rest. And we're all invited to that place. God tells us, the Bible says in Isaiah 40, verse 11, that God tends his flock like a shepherd. He gathers the lambs in his arms and carries them close to his heart. We're invited to live like this with God, being carried. I like being carried, and God likes carrying. So we are a really good team. Toby Mack, I just read this quote yesterday, says, God is not in a hurry. You are. That's why you are tired. It's why you are anxious, stressed, and disappointed. Surrender your timeline in favor of his peace. Let's just take a moment to remember how life got started. I love remembering the beginning. So in Genesis chapter 2, God wants someone to love. That's why he created human beings. So he shapes the dirt and forms and pats and carves this work of art that looks like a man. Love in its nature multiplies itself. Love wants to share. And so God said, I want someone to give this love. I am love, and I want to love. So I'm going to create this human being, and I'm going to love him. And so in verse 7 of Genesis chapter 2, God, I imagine it like this, that God picked the dirt man up in his arms. He scooped him into a bear hug. And then God leans over, puts his own holy God lips on the man's nose, and he breathes. He blows his God breath into this man. And the man comes alive. So the man opens his eyes, and what does he see? He sees this beautiful being in love with him. They make eye contact. I don't think God handed Adam a to-do list. I think they just probably stayed in that moment for a while, in each other's arms, enjoying each other. What did God expect of Adam? To be loved, to be held. And I propose that God has the same expectations of all of us. So maybe you're saying, okay, that's great, good for Adam, except things have changed. I'm not in Eden anymore. I'm not in the Shire. And God has a lot of responsibility that he's placed on me. I have a lot to do, and I can't just hang out in God's arms all the time. If that's kind of what you are feeling right now, I get it. I often feel like that too. But then God slows me down. There's a guy named Dr. Benazir who studied at Harvard and the University of California in Cambridge. So he's a legit dude. And he did a study. And he worked some math to see what are the odds that you exist. He looked at the chances of your mom and dad meeting. He did like a study to see how many people of the opposite sex would your mother and father have met by the time they were 25 years old. What are the chances they would have had a conversation, that they would have had another conversation, and then what are the chances that the right egg and the right sperm would have collided to make you? The doctor took it farther, and he studied your ancestries. What are the chances that all of your ancestors would have met and formed a relationship, and then all of the right eggs and sperms colliding to make all of those ancestors that were required to make you? Dr. Benazir, his conclusion was, the chances that you exist right now, the odds that you exist right now are almost zero. And then he gives us an illustration. He says the odds are quite similar to this, that if you take a place, you just take 2 million people altogether, which is around about the city of Chicago. So everyone in the city of Chicago, and you give each and every one of them a trillion-sided dice. So all 2 million people in Chicago are holding a dice with a trillion sides on it. Everybody rolls the dice one time, and everybody in the city of Chicago rolls the exact same number. He says that's kind of like the odds that you exist right now. For example, everyone rolls 798,473,589,673. So those are kind of the odds that you're here. And here's the thing, you had nothing to do with it. So we can all just take a deep breath. Here we sit because the maker of the universe wants us to be alive. He lined it up really strategically so that we could be here, so that he could love us. The pressure's off. Trust leads to rest, and we can trust God. He is God, and I am not. When I learned to trust God more, I learned that I can rest, that I actually don't have to have everything figured out because he's already figured it all out for me. As HL said last week, just breathing air shows our utter, inescapable dependence. God is not a slave driver with long to-do lists. He is a lover. He is a breather. And he invites us to rest. He gives us 10 commandments, and he makes one of them rest. He says it clearly in Exodus chapter 20, verse 8. He says, I want you to rest. He's wired us like this, and he himself is a rester. If we take a look at Jesus' life, Jesus is showing us who God is. He's showing us what God is like. And in Jesus' life, he is full of rest. Jesus is the great rester. He shows us that God's pace is peace. In Mark chapter 1, verse 35, this is one of many verses just like this in the New Testament. It says, very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, and went off to a solitary place where he prayed. Jesus shows us where rest comes from. It comes from being connected to the infinite tank of eternal rest, being connected to God. So it's easy to rest when we're on vacation and everyone loves us and everyone's agreeing with all of our life decisions and we're just floating around on cloud 9. Anybody could rest there, right? But life's not like that. Life is chaotic and hard, and there's full of disagreements and relational conflicts and But I believe that even in the middle of life's chaos, Jesus invites us to rest in him. And he shows us how to do that in the Gospels. In Mark chapter 6, I've just been reading that chapter several times this week, and towards the beginning of the chapter, Jesus looks at all of his disciples and he's like, you guys look tired. We haven't had time to eat, so let's all go rest. And I'm like, okay, great. But they go to a place in a boat, but as soon as they get there, the word had spread that Jesus was coming, so there are thousands of people waiting for them whenever they get there. And so I put myself in the story, and if I imagine, if we take the supernatural power of Jesus and the connection that we're able to have with him, if we take him out of the story, it's exhausting. Okay, you invite me to rest, and now we show up, and there are thousands of people here, and guess what else? All the people were hungry. So thousands of people are looking to us, and they're hungry. And then Jesus says in Mark chapter 6, he says to his disciples, let's feed them. Let's give them something to eat. Again, I put myself in that situation. I'm like, okay, great, Jesus. I guess I'll take out a loan. I'll go into debt so I can feed these thousands of hungry, grumpy people that I don't even know. And I would be in a very, very bad mood in Mark chapter 6, and I would be blaming Jesus for my lack of rest. However, if we put Jesus into the story and that we're able to live connected to him and leaning into him, the story is beautiful and full of rest. Because what happens is Jesus says to his disciples, what do we have to work with here? How much food do you have? They had a few loaves and a few fish. Not enough. A very, very inadequate amount for 5,000 men. But Jesus says, no problem, I can work with that. You just give me what you have, and I'll make it work. And that's exactly what he does. He takes their few loaves, he takes their not enough, their lack, and he thanks God for it, and he multiplies it. So then the disciples, what they get to do their only role is to watch Jesus do a miracle and then hand out miracle food to thousands of happy people who are getting fed while Jesus laughs and enjoys their company. And the whole event, instead of being stressful and involving debt, it becomes this beautiful miracle that's restful. And I just believe that that's how Jesus, maybe we're not having to feed thousands of people, but maybe you have to feed a couple. But we're able to do all things in life through Jesus, with his power working in us. So no matter what we're doing in our life, I believe it can be restful. We can do it from a position of rest. He is the God who stays rested, and we're invited to live in him. As we read the Gospels, we read that Jesus doesn't get stressed. He had a lot of demands on his life, a lot of human need around him. And human need can quite easily stress me out. But Jesus didn't get stressed. He stayed rested. He invites us clearly in John 15:4, remain in me and I will remain in you. So I think we can I believe what he wants us to do is sort of live from the Sabbath, that our days can involve taking like mental breaks and daydreaming, taking naps, enjoying long cups of coffee and long conversations. I believe that he's asking us to live our lives from the place of rest. People have spent, and are still spending, I guess, quite a bit of time studying naps. There's a guy who studies at Harvard named Robert Strickgold, and he researches naps and finds that they are very fruitful. And people who take naps are more effective problem solvers, and a list of other things. Like naps just improve mental health. Google, if you get a job at Google, God bless you, Google has these nap rooms called sleep pods that are complete with cashmere eye masks and programmed lighting. Google, that people all engineered to perfect a 20-minute cat nap, because they have decided at Google that people work better if they can rest for 20 minutes during the day. Winston Churchill also knew this. He often spent his whole morning in bed. He would work from bed and often stay in bed until 11 o'clock, and he also took a mandatory nap every single day. He says, you must sleep sometime between lunch and dinner, and no halfway measures. Take off your clothes and get into bed. That's what I always do. So God wired us like this, that our bodies need rest. Our minds need rest. We sleep, on average, 1/3 of our lives. If you live to 75 years old, you will have spent about 25 years asleep. And that's okay. That's good. That's how God designed us. In the book, Emotionally Healthy Spirituality, it's written, writing about only one is like writing a romance and naming only one of the lovers. Rest is not work's adversary. Rest is work's partner. They complement and complete each other. We have to have both, rest and work. If we think about music, every song has a rhythm, right? Every song has a tempo, which is measured in beats per minute. And some songs are super fast, some are super slow, some are in between. And some songs have what is called rubato, which is a change in tempo. And I believe God has designed our lives, if we imagine our lives to be a song, a symphony, that there is rubato. There are times to move really fast, and there are times to move really slow. And it is learning how to move to God's rhythm. God's pace is peace. Songs also have rests. A rest in music is the absence of a note, and a rest is just as important as a musical note is. Rests add depth and emotion and a chance to breathe, and they draw beauty to the notes that are being played. And if you have a song and you minus all the rest out of it, and there's no rest in music, do you know what it is? It's a siren. And I don't want my life to sound like a siren. I want it to sound like a love song that's being composed by my Maker. We have to have rest. We have to have God's rhythm in order for our lives to sound like a symphony instead of a siren. Heidi Baker, she's kind of a modern-day Mother Teresa that's feeding thousands of people in doing a really good job impacting the world for the kingdom of God. She says, run the race. Learn how to lean into Jesus. Let him hold you close until you can hear the rhythm of his heartbeat. Then you will know when to rest, when to run, and when to release. I sometimes sketch out pictures of me and God in my journal. This is not what God looks like. I think it's easy for us to think about God as a far away, hard to decipher blob in the sky who's kind of mean. But that is not who he is. He is a right here, right now friend. Wanting to hold us, wanting to help us rest, wanting to live joined to us. In Luke chapter 15, verses 11 through 31, if you're interested in getting to know God better, I would encourage you to camp out and live in this story. It has a lot to show us about what God's like. It's often called the story of the prodigal son. And there are lessons of rest in the story, plus lessons of everything else we need to know in life. I love this story. So there was a dad who was rich, and he had two sons. One son was awesome, and one son was a loser. The awesome son worked really hard. He honored his dad. He obeyed his dad. He was faithful to his dad. He worked the farm. He was a dream son. The other son said, Dad, I just want you to give me my life inheritance right now. I don't care about you. I don't care about this family. I want to do whatever I want to do. The dad obliged and gave it to him. He went off. He moved as far away as he could. He spent all the money on prostitutes and drugs and whatever else he wanted to. And then he got broke and desperate and started cleaning out pig stalls, and the food that the pigs were eating looked good to him because he was so hungry. So finally, out of desperation, he comes back to his dad and says, Dad, I'm sorry I've screwed up. The dad was like waiting for the son to come. It says that he saw him from a long way off and that he ran to him. He threw his arm. He didn't wait for the apology. He didn't wait for the shower. He ran to him, smelling like pigs, and the father threw his arms around him, kissed him, and said, hurry, I want you to bring out the best robe. I want you to put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet, and I want you to kill our fattened calf because we are going to have a feast and celebrate. The son was a jerk, a loser, a betrayer, a lowlife. The father said, none of that matters to me. All I want is to be with you, and you are invited to sit at my table with me. You are invited to rest, even now, even when you smell like a hog barn. I want you to sit at my table with me. I want to feed you, and I want to take care of you. God's grace is amazing. And the point I want to make in that story is that we don't have to do anything to earn rest. I can feel like that sometimes. Like, well, if I want to have a really good, solid day of rest, I better do this, 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 and this, and work super duper hard. And that's just not how God thinks. God invites all of us, no matter what we've been doing. He invites us to rest. Brother Lawrence wrote one of my favorite little books. I love this book. It's called Practicing the Presence of Jesus. And in it, he says this: the King, full of mercy and goodness, very far from chastising me, embraces me with love, makes me eat at his table, serves me with his own hands, gives me the key of his treasures. He confesses and delights himself with me incessantly in 1,000 ways and treats me in all respects as his favorite. So we don't have to strive hard enough to enter God's rest. His mercy invites us all to sit at the table and feast with him. He wants us to live in this position that he is bear hugging us and singing, I love you. And no matter what is happening in our lives, all of us are invited to live in this position with God. It's really good news, right? It's a relief that this is the way God is.